Hey everyone, this is a video for activity 1.2.2 3D solid modeling, and in this one we're going to take a look at how to create a construction block assembly using components. And in this video I use sketch based kind of methods in order to create the construction blocks. So with this, we're going to go ahead and make sure document settings are set to inches. And in this scenario, I'm going to go ahead and start with creating a new component actually, which I can find here in the assemble panel, or I can also find it under the create panel. Either way, I need to create a new component. We're going to have three components in this one. I'm going to use the arch block as the basis here. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the name arch. It is going to be a standard internal component, and we're going to go ahead and have it activated. So when I select OK, you're going to see over here in the browser, there's the component, and the top level of our assembly now kind of changes over to multiple blocks. The arch is its own separate component. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create Sketch. I'm going to choose the front work plane. And in this one, I'm going to go ahead and draw out a rectangle here. And to kind of place this in the center, I'm going to go ahead and use some geometric constraints. I'm going to go ahead and grab a horizontal vertical constraint, and I'm going to hold the shift key on my keyboard, select the top line when I see the little triangle symbol, which is the midpoint, and I'm going to do that right there with the origin as well. So I do need some measurements. The block itself, the height was 1 1/8 of an inch. The width is going to be 2 5/16. Okay, what you might be seeing here is we may get some lines like this where I can move the sketch. I really want it to be right on the origin. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that coincident constraint, and I'm going to hold the shift key again, grab that midpoint of the bottom line, select the origin. That is going to go through and make sure that this is fully constrained, and now I can go ahead and finish the sketch. I'm going to go ahead and extrude. The depth on this block is going to be 1 1/8 of an inch. I'll select OK. So there's our initial block, and while I'm here I can go ahead and create a new sketch on the front face. So I don't want to choose the work plane, I actually want to choose the face of the block, and I'm going to go ahead and create a circle, a center diameter circle. I'm going to set the center point right on the origin, drawing outward, and I'm going to do 11/16 times 2. I'm going to select enter. And with that, I can go ahead and I can trim the bottom portion of this circle. And just to make sure I get a complete closed loop profile, I'm going to grab the line tool. I'm going to go ahead and connect these 2 points. So just like how I did in a previous video. I'm going to go ahead and extrude, or if you're seeing this for the first time, this will go through and show you how to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to go through all, and I can go ahead and make sure the operation's set to cut, and I can select OK. So that's going to give us our arch block. Now, the biggest thing that we have to remember before we go to start modeling our next block on top of this particular one is I need to make sure that I go up here to the top level assembly and make sure that it's active. So when you put your cursor right next to this, you're going to see a radio button or a little dot. So when I click on it, you're going to see the filled in dot will shift up to the top. You'll notice that this is kind of highlighted. If I could just left click off in the white space, it will deselect that part. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new component. This one I'm going to use is going to be the wedge. So I'm going to put the wedge on top of this, and I'm going to select OK. Now when you do that, you're going to see your component list. Arch was first. Now we have a new component named wedge, but our arch is still there, which means we can base a lot of our geometry off of it. So I'm going to create a new sketch, and actually rather than picking a work plane, I'm going to choose again the front of this arch block, so which ends up being kind of transparent, but you can kind of see where the sketch plane starts to go on. So I'm going to go ahead and click on there. I'm now going to go ahead and grab the line tool, and I'm actually going to base off of the front left corner. And I'm going to go ahead and select, and I'm going to draw the profile of what this wedge would look like. And making sure that I get, again, all 3 lines that make the wedge. Go ahead and select the sketch dimension tool. Go ahead and dimension this out. The wedge was a 1-inch width with a height of 2 5/16. You'll notice the sketch geometry all turns black, so which means that it's fully constrained, which means we can go ahead and say finish sketch. I'm going to go ahead and put this into the home view, so by moving my cursor up to the view cube, usually you won't see the little house icon until you move your cursor there. So I'm going to go ahead and show this. Now I'm going to extrude this sketch profile. And either one of 2 things, I'm actually going to rotate around. You can either use the free orbit tool or the view cube. So if I grab the free orbit, I can rotate around here. Right click, say cancel to stop running that orbit command. And I'm just going to click the back of the arch block to make it the same width. And if I click the home button, this brings me back to the front. Now that I can go through, and it's going to be the same depth of what this arch block is. And now I can go ahead and say okay. And now you're going to see you have a wedge block that's been put on top of the arch. So if I go back up to the top level assembly in my browser, I can click there. There is my arch block sitting, or my wedge block sitting on top of the arch. And right now, though, the only thing is, I'll show you here in a moment how to kind of lock this into place. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in a tall, thin block, and we're going to put it right in the middle. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing again, making sure my top level is active. I'll click Create, New Component. We'll call this we'll put the tall, thin block in here. Select OK. Now this one I like to do just to add a few little features in here, so you can see this is now the active one. I'm going to go up here to Construct, and I'm going to choose Midplane. So I like to use this one just to show off some new features. And so what I'm going to do is I want this to be right in the middle. Like I want to create a sketch in the middle of this arch block, and I want it to extrude out on each side. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the front of the arch block. I'm going to rotate around. I like to use the view cube. You can use the orbit tool if you wish. And I'm going to select the back of this. So you're going to see an orange work plane that'll show up right down the middle of this arch block. I'll select OK to accept it. And when I go to create my new sketch, I'm going to choose that work plane. So a lot of times I like to zoom in and maybe grab just the edge of it. So, and be careful not to grab like the side of the arch block or the top. So I always like to kind of click and grab the edge. Now it's going to look like that I'm kind of here on the front. But again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a 2-point rectangle. I'm going to grab off of this corner, so you're going to see this little kind of rectangle, or you may see an X, a little blue X show up. But I'm going to go ahead and click, and I'm going to go ahead and draw this in. The width of the tall, thin block is going to be 1 1/8 wide, and it is 2 5/16 tall. I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Put this into the home position here. Actually, I do need to go back and make an adjustment. I read my dimensions wrong, so which is normal, and it's a good skill to take a look at. So if I go down here into my timeline, so you'll see here's the sketch that I had. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to say Edit Sketch, and I need to double click on this dimension. Actually, that tall thin block is going to be 3.5 inches tall, so it's a little bit taller than that. So it does look a little bit more representative of what we had. So once you're done making the change, finish the sketch, put this into the home view, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Extrude. And rather than building out, because right now it's either I can build out one direction or the other, and here's what I kind of want to do is I actually am going to go over here to the direction, and I want to say let's build this out symmetrically. so that way that it puts us enough material on both sides. Now the measurement says that this is the half length. We want to change this to the whole length, so by clicking on the little icons under the measurement, and the distance, we're going to change that over to 0.5, so that way we can see that that's the whole length. If we do half length, you can see it puts 0.5 on each side of the sketch, because the sketch is here in the middle. And if I go whole length, then it goes through and just, puts 0.25 on each side. So not really sure why Fusion defaults to the half length all the time, but we're going to want to make sure we do the whole length. I can select OK. I can now go ahead and activate my top level assembly. All the blocks have now been, we created this little structure. Usually what I like to do is, now if you click and drag on these, they will separate. So here's what I like to do is up here, revert to position. That way it brings them all back. If we want to lock them into place, we can go up here to Assemble and choose the as-built joint. So little quick kind of thing with assembly here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the wedge and the arch. And if you preview the motion by clicking the little play button in the menu, you'll see we want a rigid joint, which is going to lock them together and they shake. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK. The other thing I can do is if I right click on that arch block, I can choose ground. So right on the name, right click, select ground, and that'll put a little thumbtack icon. So now this one won't move, this one doesn't move, but this one still moves. So let me revert to position. Means I'm going to go ahead and go up here to Assemble, do another as-built joint, and either the wedge to this block or the arch to this block, either one. As long as you go through and select two of them, make sure the type is set to rigid, preview the motion, select OK. If you click and drag on these, they shouldn't move. And there's your little kind of construction block assembly that kind of real quick basic kind of things there just to kind of help you out. And you can see that if you need to go back and make any adjustments, you can always activate a component and down here in your timeline see what sketches and features that were used to create each one of these separate ones. And you'll see that only when you have, like for example, the wedge block activated, only that one shows up as being kind of solid, or it's a non-transparent appearance. So that's kind of a little bit of kind of how Fusion kind of organizes the browser, but also helps you organize. You can see what sketch was used, what extrusion was used to make that block, and here in the tall thin block, same kind of thing. We used a mid-plane, we created a sketch, we created an extrusion. So a lot of those things, and if I activate the top level, you can see a lot of the other things too that were used to create this particular assembly. So that's kind of the basics. So if you go through and you have another construction block assembly, so it's going to be a very similar process to do so. So explore this, be creative, and hope you enjoy kind of getting used to Fusion and exploring some of the basics of creating multiple components and doing some assembly with the construction blocks.